So we'll get started in a few seconds. We're literally just getting some more chairs, which is extremely like the best possible problem to have, which is have you a few more seats for people. So this thing you see sort of flashing in front of you is just our website. I wanted to go ahead and get it up here so you all have a sense of where to find all the information you're going to hear about today. There's a way in which it's great to hear people talking, and it's great to sort of get a sense of what's going on with the program, but at the same time, of course, at some point, you know, some wonderful Sunday morning, which hopefully is beautiful as this, you're going to sit and you want to know more, and this is where you're going to go. I'll show you a few features of this website today. So just to get started, I think, while we wait for our chairs, my name is Marissa Parham. I'm an associate professor of English here at Amherst College in the English department, And the more important thing, the reason why you all are here today, is because I'm also director of 5 College Digital Humanities. Actually, can you all hear me okay? Because we're doing this without amplification because we don't want to blow out the library. It's that kind of thing where it's so great to do an event like this at the library because you want to be in a certain kind of space that gets people in the mood, but at the same time, you're actually in the library. So it gets a little bit complex sometimes. So today, I was thinking that it's worthwhile for us to just spend some time talking about the kinds of projects that we have. And I was like, well, then rather than just have people come in and sort of talk about their projects, or rather me standing here just talking about projects, maybe it makes more sense instead to have people come talk about themselves. The problem, however, is that we actually have a good number of projects right now and more on tap sort of coming in the future. And so I was stuck with this sort of situation of, on the one hand, I want to tell people all these things. On the other, right, how do we get this done in a timely manner? So the way we came down on this is to figure out to do lightning talks instead. So like, it's so hard not to be corny when you say lightning talk. Like, it's really hard to sort of hold it together. And it's as if the kind of muse takes you over. And I was going to say, like, you know, so hold on tight to your seats because the lightning's coming. You know, like, I don't talk that way. But for some reason, as soon as I said lightning talk, I sort of had this moment of imagining that I had to say such a thing, right? And so when people ask me, what is digital humanities? I'm always in a sort of difficult position. People are getting seats, so let's get it started. Digital humanities is a difficult term to talk about because it kind of doesn't mean anything. But again, you can't invite people to come sit in your chairs and say, hey, I'm here to talk to you about how nothing means anything at all. Like, we're not going to go down that road either. But it's simply a term for thinking usually about an approach to doing scholarship. So we actually like that, in fact, digital humanities is a little bit of a catch-all term, because it's not looking at a specific way that people have to do things or looking at a specific kind of scholarship. Rather, it's introducing a new set of modalities into the work of scholarly inquiry, right? So what's interesting about this is that this kind of work, the digital humanities work, the one thing it does have in common from other fields that aren't always germane to the humanities, I'll circle back around to that, is that digital humanities work often requires more different kinds of people with more different kinds of expertise for any given project. Now, for scientists, you're like, well, duh. Like, you're used to working with technicians, you're used to working with the lab, you're used to having all kinds of different people around when you're doing your inquiry. For the humanities, it's something a little bit different, because a lot of the time, traditionally, many of us who were trained, I include myself in this, many of us who were trained as humanists were often trained to work alone. Right, I'm speaking from a faculty perspective. Not only were you trained to work alone, but you're very often trained to work in environments where you're the only person in the environment representing the thing you do. Right? There's a way in which, you know, we can make all kinds of arguments back and forth. I'm not even sure I care that much anymore about the value of that system to academia. But I can say that it's become quite an interesting moment of realizing that this new push into integrating new kinds of technology into teaching and learning has changed the nature on some level what it means to be a scholar. You do, as a humanist, often still spend a lot of time alone. And when I'm speaking of humanists, by the way, I'm not only speaking of myself as a faculty person. I'm thinking of students doing work for classes or on their own. I'm thinking of technologists who also have other kinds of creative projects. I'm thinking of artists. I'm thinking of librarians. You see what I'm saying, just to be clear when I'm saying that. My habit is saying humanist, but as part of me being used to being in the digital humanities environment where that means a whole range of people. But just to be clear, speaking as a faculty person, I'm not just only talking about myself. And so there's a way in which doing this new kind of work introduces to the enterprise, well, actually, scratch that. It introduces to the idea of scholarship the idea of enterprise, right? You don't just set off on a thing you're going to work on. You set off on a thing, an enterprise. You have people. Sometimes you need staffing. Sometimes you need collaboration. Most often, actually 95% of the time, you probably need a collaborator. And that what people bring to the project is often very different from what other people bring, which seems like a duh, but you can imagine if any of you are humanists, for instance, and you've ever tried to work with biologists, on some level you don't speak the same language, right? And that becomes really complex when you're thinking about people, in this case, of working all toward the same goal, but coming to that goal with explicitly different approaches. And that difference in approach is actually of value to the project, even as we don't necessarily have a system under which we understand necessarily how to have instant translation. Now, one thing you hear a lot in digital humanities is how great it is to fail, how great it is to have miscommunication. Like, DH has done this thing that makes everything awkward about digital humanities into a plus. And as an awkward person, I personally appreciate that immensely. So the idea simply is that you don't necessarily set out on a project with the given understanding that what you're going to come to is the thing you were looking for when you first began, right? You don't come into a project necessarily assuming that the process by which you're going to arrive at the conclusion can necessarily be cleanly mapped out at the beginning. There's always a great moment, if you've ever done a digital project, where you've worked out people who are going to think about metadata. You've worked out the people who are going to think about the website delivery. You've worked out people who are going to think about all the various aspects of the project, right? And then you realize the thing you really need is a designer. Because it's great to have all this information, but it doesn't mean anything if people can't immediately access the information in a very straightforward kind of way. That changes how we're thinking. Because I don't know about you, but even for my generation in the humanities, you were never supposed to think about making things pretty or shiny or nice. Because if you were doing too much of that, you weren't doing the right thing. I remember having a moment even years ago sort of adjusting the fonts on the syllabus, and one of my unnamed older colleagues who was retired was like, I'm not sure what that has to do with learning. And you're like, well, if they can't see it, shit, they can't learn, right? But there's I apologize, I'm a potty mouth. But there's a way in which, right, it's about a fundamental shift, again, in how we talk about this kind of stuff, how we talk about scholarship, etc. So if anyone were to ask you, and you tell people today that you're at a symposium or you're at a panel today talking about digital humanities, and they ask you what the digital humanities are, I'm going to give you a blurb. And this is the blurb. I'm putting you all out there as PR people. And we have a few moments today for a little bit of Q&R, so you can, kind of troubleshoot the blurb and come up with something that works better for you. But I'm going to give you a starting point. First, you look, and they always go, digital humanities, I can't even use my computer. You're going to look at them, and you say, no, it's really simple. And they're going to, shrug, whatever. But you're going to pull this off. You're going to say, no, it's really pretty simple. DH, and you're going to say DH, and they're going to be like, that's jargon. You're like, no, it's another, abbreviation. You say, it's DH is a way of describing how we develop and use new tools to ask different kinds of questions about subjects that have always been interesting to the arts and humanities, right? So it's a way of saying you don't necessarily have to change what you're interested in. You're simply changing how you approach the question and how you approach the act of questioning, right? And you say, not only are we doing this to change, because the next thing you often get right is like, well, the humanities aren't broken. The arts aren't broken. We don't need to fix them. And again, you will center yourself and you will say, well, we're not trying to fix something that's broken. Again, we're just trying to offer ways for people to work differently and also to work across different units in the college and university systems, to really work with technologists, to really work with librarians, if you're a librarian, to really work with the technologists, to really work hands-on with students outside of someone else's class setting, right? Again, these are vast shifts in how we're thinking about this kind of work is getting done. And it's not that we're trying to fix anything or that anything needs fixing. It's also thinking about the ways in which technology, I don't care how anyone feels about it, has become more ubiquitous. And of course, if you're a history of technology person, you immediately say, well, everything's technology. I do this in my classes. A pen is technology. No one's interested, but it's true, right? But we know when we say technology, we're usually thinking technology with a capital T, and the ways in which technology is transforming our lives, the ways in which fewer people read paper newspapers, they read online. That moment you order that package from Amazon and it shall drop it upon your head from the sky, right? That's technology with a large T, with a capital T, right? And when we're thinking about this, we want to think then about the ways in which the level of intense critique that the arts and humanities have always been able to bring to phenomena in the world is incredibly important when we're thinking about the role of technology in our lives. Technology is not something you can't care about, right? As soon as you get your new iPhone update, if you're an iPhone person, and you're clicking through your new icons and you see one that says health, you have to be able to think about that. You're thinking not only what does it mean for me to have my heart rate recorded by my phone, but what happens to the data? What's the meaning of the data? How is data created? How is data differently? Am I just data? Was it me that I think that I'm data? I'm kind of standing here talking like a person. Oh my God, right? There's a way in which we have to be able to actually navigate that and think about that. And this is something that the arts and humanities can actually bring through digital humanities to the larger world. So again, it's not about fixing humanities or even changing humanities. It's about creating different kinds of conversations that enable more broad kinds of questioning and also enable other kinds of inquiries more generally. So I'm going to stop there, but I'm going to give you just a little bit of information. If you want to know more about our projects, you can learn more on our website. All of our projects have these beautiful sort of pages. We'll be hearing from these guys. Today I'll click this one as well. Oops, just click over here. Sorry, I'm having someone else's computer moment. It's horrible. If you look, you can find information about the project. You can find who's on the site, what kinds of other projects they have going on, where you can learn more, a Twitter feed when available. That's the one thing I have to say today also. For better or for worse, one thing that has changed is that much of digital humanities does happen on Twitter. Not the actual work, but the talking about, the news, the sharing, the new tools. We're going to be on Twitter today, live tweeting the event. If you need more information about everything, you can go to Twitter. You can use our hashtag, which is hashtag 5CDH. It's really easy to remember. And anything that comes of interest to you during something you want to talk about, something you've seen, just tweet it. We'll curate it later. As long as you use that hashtag 5CDH, we can always find your posts, and we can keep this conversation going long after today is over. But that's not to say today is not going to be amazing to remember for the rest of your lives, and everything will have a heavy impact on you. But nonetheless, I think it'll be great to have a resource to which you return in case you want more information. We're around all day. We have lots of great talks coming up. Oh, sorry, guys. Lots of great talks coming up, etc. Yeah, that's the technology of the capital T, because that's you right now. And there's a way in which, yeah, I won't stop. So let's get started. We have our talks coming up. They're pretty fast. They're lightning talks. We have plenty of time for Q&A, plenty of time to talk over our amazing treats. So if you want to know more from people, you can just ask them about it after their talks today. Let's get started.